One of the biggest needs for the Pittsburgh Steelers this NFL draft season is still the offensive line. It's been that way for the past couple years, but when you look at the offensive line this year, you're obviously looking at center because we don't have one. We didn't even sign anyone at center or anyone on the offensive line in this free agency. We addressed many positions, but didn't bring one single body in to the offensive line group. Not one.
Not yet.
In fact, we've lost more than we've gained in that offensive line room this offseason. But obviously, there's still the draft, and it is believed the Steelers are going to select offensive linemen pretty early into the draft. That is going to be center and offensive tackle, preferably right tackle, because Broderick Jones should be moved to left. I know it's been oversaid, but it is the truth. Broderick Jones should be moved over to left, and they should draft a right tackle, preferably a day one starting right tackle, but looking at their needs and what they might be looking at their tackle position and how they're viewing it, it might not be a day one starting right tackle. It could be, but it could not be. I don't know. This is what this entire video is going to be about today. We're going to be discussing the Steelers' offensive tackle position, the right tackle position, and when will the Steelers draft an offensive tackle. We'll obviously talk about some of the main options and some of the more interesting names that are in relation to the Pittsburgh Steelers and interest they've shown in certain guys. Omar Khan has confirmed that at some point eventually, Broderick Jones will be a left tackle. He was drafted to be a left tackle, and at some point eventually he will be moved back to his natural position. Omar Khan did confirm that, and we all trust Omar Khan in his word. We all trust Omar Khan in a lot of things he does, just based on how he's improved the team in the draft class alone last year.
Yeah.
And seeing what he's done this entire offseason, which has been great, if I were to say the least.
Probably the most wild Steelers offseason in recent memory. Probably ever.
Very much so. Because he said eventually, that means Broderick Jones could still start at right tackle come week one of the 2024 season, which means Dan Moore.
We could still see Dan Moore at left tackle, unfortunately. You guys already know our feelings on Dan Moore. I'm sure you guys had the same feeling. Dan Moore is not a starting tackle for the Steelers.
No, he's very much like a Chuck Okorafor. Chuck Okorafor was drafted in the third round, and he was a swing guy going to left, and then eventually the right, back to left, and then primarily back to right the last couple years. And he is serviceable. He is not a long-term guy. It's probably best if he is a depth guy, if he is that swing guy. That's how I view Dan Moore as. He's not a long-term solution. He is serviceable, but we could obviously do better, and we're going to need better. Because the last 3 years, there hasn't been so much improvement. There hasn't been a lot of promise shown by Dan Moore. He's just there. You know,
every year it's been nothing but the same.
Pretty much.
Every year it's been nothing but the same. The guy's not a franchise left tackle.
But aside from our own opinions and your guys' own opinions, the Steelers might think the same, but that won't force the Steelers to select offensive tackle early into the draft. They very well still could, and they've looked at some of the top names, which we'll discuss, but that's not going to force them to select offensive tackle if so many names are falling off the board, which there could be a lot, because tackle early on in the first round, within the first 20 picks, there could be half a dozen tackles off the board. That's how great it is. That's how stacked it is. And that's how necessary it is in the NFL these days. And so many tackle-needy teams ahead of us before pick 20.
Yep.
So it's not going to force them to select offensive tackle because they have a lean on in Dan Moore because he started the last 3 years. And they could still draft a guy later and develop him for at least, I would say, half the season, very much like Broderick or even Joey Porter Jr. last year with Levi Wallace and all that. They could sit for at least half the season and then be fulfilled as that next guy, as that long-term starter, ideally. That could be what the Steelers do. Or hopefully that's not the case, and they do select an offensive tackle early, preferably a day one starting offensive tackle.
Yeah.
Now, who exactly is worthy or considered to be a day one starting right tackle? There's not a lot that the Steelers could realistically select that are considered day one starting right tackles. Realistically, and this is still stretching realistically. Realistically, you're looking at Talisi Fuaga from Oregon State,
who the Steelers had a top 30 visit with.
and they've shown interest in him, and that along with Jackson Powers-Johnson. Don't get it twisted about our talk about offensive tackle and our opinion about offensive tackle. We still got to draft a center. Even if they select offensive tackle in the first round, center is still going to be selected at some point, preferably round 2, because
It's got to be.
because we don't have one, which would push wide receiver back. I understand that, but again, it's a stat class, so they could. But Talisi Fuaga, and I would say J.C. Latham from Alabama, and they sent the house to Alabama as they usually do. And Latham he's bigger than most tackle prospects. He's about as big, maybe a little smaller than a Marius Mims. And he plays like a guard, but he can protect like a tackle. Like, it's insane. And he's a brick wall. So one of those two guys would be home run selections at 20, or if they wanted to trade up for a tackle, which they did last year for Broderick. So they're no stranger. They're not scared of doing that. And it wouldn't cost a lot at all. So they could very well do that. Those are probably two of the realistic, quote-unquote, options at offensive tackle for the Steelers in the first round. Otherwise, if you want to talk, like, truthfully realistic, Amarius Mims, probably at 20, he could very well still be there. I don't think he'd be a day one starter, only because he has started 8 games in the collegiate level, and he has injury concerns. He's very much like Broderick, only Broderick had a ton more starts.
Yeah.
And Broderick didn't even start day one last year, when he probably should have, but he didn't start day one last year. So if they were selecting Marius Mims, he might not start day one, thus he can sit very much like his fellow Georgia alumni and Jones, and sit half the season before eventually starting at right tackle.
Right, but we all know the type of potential that Mims does bring. I mean, his size is out of this world, literally. Like, he's a big dude, and he's very athletic.
And I also want to add Troy Fuatanu. Am I pronouncing that right, from Washington?
Yeah, of course.
Now, he's more of a left tackle. So when we talk about tackles in this discussion here, we're talking primarily right tackles, because based on what Omar Khan said, and pretty much all of Steelers Nation's personal opinion, we got to move Broderick back to left. So why draft a left tackle just to keep Broderick at right?
And that's just out of position.
That's out of position, exactly.
Yeah.
So draft a right tackle, someone that's played that position comfortably put Broderick back over to his natural position, and then your tackles are solidified.
Yeah, you're A-okay. You're protecting your quarterback. You're getting your blockers for the running attack,
Exactly. So if they want to select a guy in the first round, they could, and honestly, it's not out of the realm of possibility. It's probably the smart thing to do. We still say center, but they can still draft center later. Same thing with tackle. It's a whole vice versa sort of deal. Mm-hmm. But if they want to really get one of those top dogs, they might have to trade up. In some crazy world, they could drop, and they could select a guy like a Fuaga or like a J.C. Latham at 20, but those will probably require trade-ups. Because you look at the tackles in this draft. Mm-hmm. You're looking at Joe Alt, who's going to be arguably a top 10 pick, maybe even top 5.
Probably top 5.
Fuaga, who might be a top 10, top 15 pick.
He's top 10 potential, in my opinion.
I find it very difficult that he's going to make it past the Raiders. If he makes it past the Raiders, I'm trading up. Especially in front of the Bengals.
Yeah. Right?
Just doing that. J.C. Latham very well could be there. He might be selected right before us. The Bengals might take him. I don't know. I know they picked up Trent Brown, but they're still going to need someone long-term, aren't they?
Yeah.
So, I mean, he could still be there. Amarius Mims, again, it really depends on how many tackles fall off the board. It could be very much like last year, where tackle was flying off the charts. There goes Paris Johnson. There goes Darnell Wright. There goes however many tackles that fell off the board, and we were only left with Broderick Jones. And thus the Steelers had to make the decision to trade up for him. So it could very well be that similar situation where tackles are just flying off the board all over the place. And if they really want to secure their next guy, they're going to have to trade up. And they're no stranger to doing that, and it wouldn't cost a lot.
No, they're not scared to do so, especially to a guy like Broderick, who didn't have a lot of experience, but that, again, it didn't shy them away from making the move. Because they know it was necessary.
But they're also not pressured to do that because of Dan Moore, because of that lean on. They don't have a lean on at center. They don't have a lean on at wide receiver. I don't even say they have a lean on at slot corner.
No, they don't.
They have a lean on at tackle. So they don't have to feel pressured to trade up for an offensive tackle if they don't feel pressured to do so. They could still fall back and draft a guy later. And they have done their due diligence. They've looked at the top talent, obviously, because if they I don't know exactly who they're looking at to select at 20, but from the looks of it, it's looking more so like it's going to be offensive line. And it should be.
Yeah, but as far as the tackle position goes, I mean, they are clearly looking at some of the top dogs.
Yeah.
Some of the top guys, as they should be. But they've also been looking. They've been doing their due diligence in the later rounds, day 2 and maybe even day 3. You know, they've been looking at every aspect at the tackle position.
Yeah.
They had a formal meeting with Blake Fisher out of Notre Dame, so the interest is there. Fisher is a very nice guy, a little inconsistent, but a nice developmental project. If they want to fall back, they get a guy like Blake Fisher. Roger Rosengarten.
Yep.
Out of Washington. He was more of the responsible tackle at Washington since Michael Phoenix is left-handed, so he was the blindside blocker over there at Washington.
A lot more weight on the shoulders.
And a very pass-heavy offense too in Washington. Washington's got 3 wide receivers coming into the draft.
Yeah.
Very pass-heavy.
I'll throw his name out there as well, Tyler Guyton. He might go late first round, but I'm sure they've shown interest in him.
Oh, yeah. I mean, again, due diligence. They had to.
Same thing with a Graham Barton. I mean, he's a little smaller, so he might have to be forced inside.
I've been hearing that he may have to move inside long-term at the NFL level. But
I see him more as a guard. I know there's people saying he could play center. And he could, man. The guy's a baller. The guy's a hard worker. He is so young. He's so versatile. He's going to be a home run pick no matter who selects him. I don't think he can play tackle because he's a little smaller, especially his arm length, which is why he'd probably be best suited inside. More so like a guard. I know everyone says center. He hasn't played center since 2020.
Right.
He can play it, but he's also inexperienced just because of that. So maybe at guard would be a better fit for him, but Steelers are looking at him. So I'm going to throw his name out there because he's going to be a very top option at 20, especially depending on how far or how many tackles fall off the board.
Possibly.
I mean,
possibly.
Patrick Paul, I know he's more of a left tackle, but still just showing interest in him. A Dominic Pooney, a Matt Gonkovich, who was the kid next door in Pittsburgh. They had a top 30 visit with him.
They're scheduled to. They're scheduled to have a top 30 visit with them. And Gonkovich, I believe he's coming off an ACL tear. He suffered it early last college season in Pittsburgh, but you want to talk about a swing guy who's played both left and right. He's a guy that fits the mold for what the Steelers could be possibly looking at in the later rounds for a guy as not only depth, not only as a swing guy, but as a developmental piece for them to figure out where he's most comfortable.
And speaking of that, I'll add Kingsley from BYU. I cannot pronounce his last name, so I will not try, but Kingsley from BYU. He's another swing guy. I see his potential. He has a great build. Pretty decent in pass protection. Could be better in the run blocking ability. He want to be a day 1 starter, and that swing ability, like you said, could see where he's most comfortable. I see him better as a right tackle, just from what I've seen from the film I've watched. Mm-hmm. So if they want a swing guy, maybe they do entertain Broderick remaining at right tackle, and they want to entertain left tackle options. Kingsley is one of those swing guys that could give them options at if they want to keep Broderick over at right or move him back to left. So they could do that. He's definitely a project. He's going to have to sit. So whenever the Steelers draft an offensive tackle, I mean, the value drops from, I would say, between picks or before picks 20, most of the guys are day 1 starters. I'd say after J.C. Latham, no one's a day 1 starter.
I'll probably have to agree with that. I probably would.
Yeah.
Guyton may be capable of starting day 1, but, there's a couple kinks for him to work out.
I still see him a little raw.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, don't get me wrong, so do I.
Yeah.
But if there's anybody else outside of Latham, I think Guyton could have that potential to work day 1, but yes, he's still raw.
Yeah, so I would say anyone right after J.C. Latham is gonna have to sit, which would be like an Amarius Mims, like a Tyler Guyton, like a if they want to go one day 2, which could be very realistic. Like you said, Blake Fisher, Rosengarten, Gonkovich, maybe even a Christian Jones. I know it might be a little too high for him, but they might want to secure a guy depending on how the boards fall.
Yeah.
It's who knows? They could go center and then wide receiver and then tackle. But who could be available at tackle? We don't know. They could go tackle, then center, then receiver. They can go center, tackle, whatever. They can go any which way they want at what position.
Yeah, they can.
It all depends on how the board falls, how their draft boards look, and what they prioritize the most, which, based on Mike Tomlin's comments, especially at the NFL annual meetings, he was very talkative, more so about center and receiver more than tackle.
Yeah.
Which could allude to the Steelers taking center and receiver first, no matter what order that is, and then waiting on tackle. Or maybe they want to take maybe they want to take center later and then take a tackle first round. I don't know.
I don't know what the Steelers are doing. I mean, that's what makes it even that much more exciting when it comes to draft time, because with the needs that the Steelers have at center, receiver, tackle, even, maybe cornerback, right? It goes to show that they could go anywhere. And that's what makes the draft exciting. But as far as tackle goes, with the names that we listed, with what we talked about from day 1 to day 2, even day 3 candidate type of guys, Steelers are doing their due diligence on everybody and anybody.
They will not be out of options. That's
no, they won't.
Tackle stacked. This year is a very good year to draft a tackle, no matter where it's going to be. It is that stacked. And looking at the Steelers' more pressing needs, yeah, they could wait for tackle.
And because of the guy that we have in Dan Moore, we all know how we feel about Dan Moore, but they have that insurance policy, I suppose, at left tackle. But because of how stacked tackle is as well, they can get a guy later and have him work under Pat Meyer.
Yes.
Work on the bench, work on his developmental phases. Simple as that.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's one of those situations where, yeah, they're doing their due diligence. They're looking at the top guys because one could fall. And depending on how the draft board goes, they could trade up for one. They could just select an offensive tackle right then and there at pick 20 and then save center for later. They could do that. Center isn't as stacked as tackle, so maybe they take center first round and then wait for tackle second or third. Either one's a decent option because, again, tackle is so stacked that they're not out of options no matter which direction they go.
Right.
In our personal opinion, the sign says so, we should go center first round because we need to fulfill that position. I would much rather feel a lot more comfortable knowing, hey, I went center first round with the 20th pick, or even if they trade back, they go center in the first round, select that position, and have fulfilled that position for the next 10 to 15 years with one of the top 3 or 4 centers, which that is Jackson Powers-Johnson, Zach Frazier, Cedric Van Pan-Granger, or like a Graham Barton, if they want to entertain him at center.
Right.
I would much rather feel comfortable knowing, hey, I solidified center, I got that fixed for 10 to 15 years, and I can still draft a tackle later than drafting a tackle early and then potentially missing out on the top centers.
Yeah, considering the fact we don't have a center on the team. We have nobody. We don't.
No. We don't.
I don't know if the Steelers are going to want to take that risk at taking a tackle early, though. It could be worth it, fixing that position.
Yeah.
But, again, the Steelers have an insurance policy and Dan Moore, while at center, they don't exactly.
Or because I want to entertain this because this is very realistic and we have seen it in years past, and it's just because NFL teams, for some reason, do not value the center position anymore. You don't see centers going as high as they used to in years past. You don't.
Yeah, Creed Humphrey, he fell all the way to the back end of round 2.
Yeah, and we passed on him twice, by the way.
Yes, but you get my point.
Tyler Linderbaum went, 25th overall?
Yeah.
To the Ravens. He went later than usual. Mm-hmm. So center is not valued like most teams should value it, in our own opinion. So could it be a situation where they grab a tackle day 1 in the first round, whether that is trading up or just selecting one with the 20th pick? Could there be a situation where it's very much like Creed Humphrey, where they select a tackle in the first round, and then in the second round they fall back and still, for some reason, in some weird universe, they still select one of the top centers?
It's a big possibility.
Or
it really is.
If someone drops enough, like say like the talks or the rumors of a Jackson Powers-Johnson falling down draft boards is true, maybe they select a tackle in the first round, like they trade up for one or select one at 20, whatever the case may be, and then they still go up into the second round, maybe even trade up if they have to still get one of the top centers, and you get best of both worlds. You get your day 1 starting right tackle, and then you get your franchise center.
That would be a big dream scenario for offensive line for the Steelers. If that were to happen, that would be an absolute slam dunk home run.
But it's not out the realm of possibility because even if you look at last year's draft, we were looking at the draft. We were seeing how everything was going down. We saw how the cards fell, how players were falling down, the draft boards were going, right? And we're thinking, how are these guys still on the board? How is Joey Porter Jr. still here at 32?
How did he make it out of the first round?
How is Darnell Washington here at pick 93, even though the Steelers traded back? How is Nick Herbig still here in the 4th round? How is Keanu Benton still there? And that's why, like last year, we were saying how every single selection was incredible value because we were able to select these guys later than they should have went.
Yeah.
Could that be another situation? Everyone's draft boards is different. Every single NFL draft rooms are different.
Yeah.
So things could happen. We could very well get the best of both worlds where we select the tackle first round and we grab one of the best ones in the second round, whether that is remaining there at 51 or trading up, which they very well could, and I think they should if someone falls that far, like a Jackson Powers Johnson. That might be wishful thinking. That might be me being a little too optimistic, only because there are still a lot of center-needy teams in the first round. There are the Eagles. There are I want to say not the Jags, they signed Morse. The Dolphins signed Aaron Brewer. Do the Titans have a center?
I don't know if they do.
So there's still some
I don't know if they do.
teams.
Some teams could trade back, earlier in the draft. They could trade back and maybe certain teams that need a center could pick them later in the first round. That's a possibility. A lot of trades could happen come draft time.
Absolutely. So, I mean, again, that might be wishful thinking for me, hoping that we get the best of both worlds. But anything can happen in the NFL, man. There's some crazier stuff that have went down. Last year was crazy with how everything turned out for the Steelers.
Yeah, and Omar Khan was quick to take advantage of that.
So the same thing could happen again, man.
I don't know. Hey, listen, it's a huge possibility. It happens every draft.
Yeah, I'll throw another one. Cowboys need a center. They don't have a center.
They don't. They have nothing at the moment. They've done nothing at the moment. So
no,
but yes, you're right. They don't have center. They lost their center.
Do the Bills have a center?
I don't think they replaced anybody since they got rid of Mitch Morse.
So, again, maybe I'm being very, very wishful and thinking maybe certain centers could fall. But, again, maybe these teams don't go center. I don't know.
Again, some teams just don't value center like they used to.
Yeah.
Like back in the old days.
Or perhaps just some of those reports are coming from certain draft rooms that don't value it, and other draft rooms are valuing it more than the other teams are.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Anything can happen on draft night.
A lot could happen on draft night.
A lot could happen. Like we said, in our own personal opinion, we would much rather go center and gain a guy, one of the top guys, and then take a tackle later.
And I do see the Steelers selecting a tackle. I think it's inevitable. It's just a matter of who, where, and when.
Yeah, they should definitely take one within the first 2 days. They could fall back to day 3 if they want to. It's stacked enough, and I think someone would fall deep enough where you could still grab someone that's decent enough to develop and then eventually take over that tackle position. Dan Moore was a 4th rounder, and he's been starting the position the last 3 years.
Yeah, he has.
So, and Andrew Waddle and Omar Khan are very good at finding those mid-round gems that could have an immediate impact.
Yeah.
So, anywhere they go, I think the Steelers are definitely going to draft tackle, and they're going to get one of the better ones because it's that stacked enough. Or they could just very well go full head first into him, like, you know what, let's just get the best guy available. Let's get the best guy possible, like they did last year.
Yeah.
But again, there's so many other needs because center, receiver, slot corner, they could push either of them back as well because some of those positions are a little more stacked. So, like, receiver stacked, slot corner is pretty stacked, tackle stacked. I can't say the same thing for center.
No, you can't.
So,
You can't.
I don't know where the Steelers are going to select tackle, but they definitely will. But you got to keep all your options on the table. They could take one first round, second round, third round, fourth round. They've done their due diligence. They've looked at everyone possible. They've went to their pro days. They sent the O-line coach to as many pro days as possible, looking at some of the top names from great, successful schools. So they've done everything they could. But it's going to be very interesting to see come the draft weekend, where they select the tackle. I'd say within the first 3 picks, I think that's the ideal situation. But if they want to wait till later, they have all the flexibility to do so. So we'll see what happens. Anything could happen on draft night. It might our hopes and dreams might come true where they get a center and then a tackle, or vice versa, and then still get a great receiver, or they could fall back. This is the draft class to do it.
A lot can happen.
It's actually, this draft class it's a very good problem to have. It really is. Knowing how many needs they have and what they might have to take before tackle and seeing how stacked it's a good problem to have for the Steelers. So going into the draft, you got to feel confident. You got to feel good about what the Steelers have done, where their positions lie, and who they can very well take.
And just weighing all their options, just seeing how the cards play out.
Yeah, it's going to be a very interesting draft come draft night, draft weekend. So, but let us know your guys' thoughts in the comments below. Where do you think the Steelers should take offensive tackle? What names do you hope the Steelers select? Is there any names we may have not have named? Keep in mind, this was more so talking about right tackles, because
And that's what we're expecting based off Omar Khan's comments, and that's kind of what we're hoping because Broderick's naturally a left guy, so just look for a right tackle. But again,
it's the most rational move for the Steelers.
but again, they're weighing all their options on the table.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens. Let us know your guys' thoughts down below. Here we go, Steelers, and we'll see what happens, man. See you guys in the next one.
And as always, like, comment, subscribe, and we'll see you later. Peace!